I'm going to read this so I don't get this quote wrong, but technology should be like oxygen, ubiquitous, necessary, and invisible. And that is something I kind of really believe in. Like to improve teaching and learning, tech can't have a whole bunch of like hoops you have to jump through in order to use. So another piece is trying to identify and use solutions that are easy for people to use. And one of the biggest barriers to people using technology sometimes is just logging in.
Yeah.
Don't know my password, I don't know what username. I mean, that sort of thing. It seems like a silly thing, but I'm sure you've experienced this. It's
Been there,
it,
done
it
that. Yeah.
exactly. I mean, it's a huge barrier. So a simple thing at our school is, we have pretty much everything set up to do single sign-on.
Mm,
So any tool that we use, I really want to see, unless there's a really compelling reason to use it, and there's not another alternative, I want to see that they log in and it has like a sign in with Google button,
mm,
or it
yeah.
just automatically will, use our authentication that we have through our LMS and SIS, which is what we do at Digiexam, for example,
Mm,
to where basically that sign in is handled. And then on the back end of things too, there's the whole account creation and stuff like that. So there is a piece of, and this is the stuff that the teachers don't need to worry about. If it works well, it makes them happy and it makes it usable for them. But this is, I guess, John, you mentioned that, my sort of background coming from a technology point of view,
oh,
that where I guess that helps because I do understand enough about the tech and I still keep up with that to where I understand that, SSO is important and how it could work and how we might have to synchronize class rosters and do that sort of thing so teachers don't have to like create classes by hand. That's the piece that, that I'll look for and, try to make sure something like that is available.
like first things first. Thank you for taking your time, Bill. We really appreciate this. And but yeah, let's do a quick introduction because we haven't seen each other before. We may have talked, early days. I think I was just getting back to watch. When did your school sign with us? I think it was in 2019, right?
That sounds about
Um,
right. Yep.
I'm Carl Nardini. I'm head of sales, and I've been around at Digiexam pretty much since we launched Digiexam in 2014. Um, I think it's me and one more that are or maybe it's only me now that is
I think
still the original team.
of course, my name is John DiMaria. I am working as a customer success manager here at Digiexam. I actually came from the education sector, from I guess you could say the light side of things, and moved into the dark side. That's why I'm wearing the black today. It's the whole Vader thing. But I worked as a teacher. My background is in education in that sense, and I worked also as I progressed through as like a school leader, and then developed into the IT director and director of technologies kind of positions, and then eventually transitioned to working with educational technology and impacting it from that end. But today, here with us, we have Bill Campbell from the Dwight-Englewood School. Super excited to talk with you and get your insight. Bill, you are the Associate Director of Technology for Academics, right? I got it right, I think. Yes, good.
Yeah.
At Dwight-Englewood. And your school is in New Jersey. Yeah, Northeast. That's where I grew up. Well, not in New Jersey, but close enough. We'll count it as that. And you work on, like, I guess, we'll get into this. You work on the allocation of educational technologies or academic technologies, right?
Yeah, I
And then
spend a lot of
also,
time working with teachers individually as well.
yeah. So I mean, and I think maybe that's a great place to sort of start off. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background and I mean, we can go back to way back if you want, and and go from there. But yeah, give us a little background in terms of what you do.
Sure. Well, if we want to go way back, well, I went to a small liberal arts college, which actually is kind of my start. Um, it was one of the first undergraduate universities, I think, to do one-to-one computing, and
Mm.
we're talking back in the late 80s. Um, so, when I showed up in my dorm room, there was a desktop computer, an IBM PC clone, sitting there with a dot matrix printer, and so, I was involved a fair amount with computing from a beginning, more so in college. I mean, I did play video games and stuff a little bit in high school. They did have video games then too, the Atari 2600. Um, but but,
Perfect. That's
during
great.
that, yeah, I still have one. It works. I can actually plug it in and it'll actually function. Um, the when I went to college, I was not intended to go into anything with technology. I'd explored a bunch of sort of different liberal arts related majors, psychology, anthropology, sociology, things like that. But I got interested probably because of the computer being there. My roommate and I spending a lot of time kind of messing around on the computer. And this was again kind of pre-internet. There wasn't really a World Wide Web then. There was connections between colleges, so there was
Right.
similar things to that. But so I decided I wanted to minor in computer science. So I constantly took intro to this, intro to that, intro to whatever, as most liberal arts colleges have you do, looking for a major, and I never found one. And I ended up just deciding, okay, I'll major in computer science. And then in addition to doing that, I worked for the help desk as a work study job. So I was doing help desk, answering calls, helping people with their word processing and things like that, when I was in my late teens, early 20s. And from there, I worked Bell Communications Research for a couple of years as a research assistant, which is kind of a side thing, doesn't tie in my career. But then right after that, only a couple of years out of college, I started working for my first school.
Oh, wow.
And in doing that, I was the director of computer services, directing a department of me, just myself and the computers. Taught the applications class that back then everybody sort of had to take and is horrible now thinking about it. It was like word processing, spreadsheets, databases, but taught in a complete vacuum with no connection to the curriculum. I mean, I would not hold it up as an example of anything, but that's how we started, or how I started with teaching. And then from there, I mean, I was doing scheduling the school, and I was teaching the class, and I was maintaining the computers and helping people with their stuff. And then I actually was only there a couple of years as a different independent school, and then I started at Dwight-Englewood where I'm now, and I've this is my 30th year there. So I've been there a while. I started there primarily working in computer services a little bit, but also scheduling the school, and then moved towards being director of technology services there for a while when IT was not tightly tied into the academic piece of things.
Hmm.
So, there wasn't really instructional technology people at that point. I was, the manager of a couple of people in my department, just making sure that everything worked and, email work to manage the email system and things like that. And then after doing that for a while, I actually kind of took a sidestep to focus really more on instructional technology. So I spend a lot of my time now working with teachers, doing professional development with teachers, mostly working in small groups or individual one-on-one, although I will conduct some training classes and things sometimes, and just trying to help teachers find ways to improve teaching and learning, by using digital technology.
Yeah.
And that's for the most part, what I do now. So I came into education, I guess, more from the tech side, but my tech was almost always in schools. And then I've taught a class, not every single year, but of my 32 years in schools, 28 of them or 27 of them, I've taught a class or two classes. So I've always taught. Never been a full-time classroom teacher, so I have a lot of respect for the teachers who are full-time, that's what they're doing all day. I haven't had that experience, but I've been around education enough to, at least have empathy for what they have to deal with in teaching 4 to 6 classes and a lot of kids and dealing with everything.
But I think that it's interesting. Like, I mean, and it's great that you gave us this sort of like where you came from and what roles you've had and the um, uh, different types of technology that you've been involved with along this path. Because I think that and this is maybe just me getting excited about talking about this stuff, but it what you're describing, or at least the picture that I'm getting in my head already, is that you've have this ability to walk in between, or walk between. So you understand sort of the technical infrastructure side of things. You also understand what it might take in the classroom, and to be able to be the mediator between those two worlds is often, I think, a trick. And it sounds like that's what some aspects of your role is that you're trying to act as this like liaison. And I mean, we're gonna hopefully find out more about exactly that. But it's I can just think from how we work here when we're talking with our developers and the development team, and then all of a sudden we're thinking about like innovative ideas, and trying to get those through based on what teachers and what tech directors and instructional designers are talking about. There's a big disconnect between those two worlds, because on one hand, you're talking about the pedagogy, and on the other hand, you're talking about the actual physical, or I guess the realistic nature of what's possible. So this will be fun. Oh, I'm I'm super excited. I can't stop laughing and smiling. I'm like, oh man, this is great. Um, but so how I'm just trying to grasp how big is Dwight-Englewood? Like, how many students, how many faculty do you have?
So we have a little over 1,000 students,
Mhm.
and that's pre-K, 3-year-olds up through 12th graders.
Okay.
Next step is college for almost all of them is college. It's hard to count faculty, but I would say about 175.
Okay.
Because how you define a faculty member can be a little tricky, and some are part-time, some are full-time. But I think I don't know what our official number is, 165, 175. But that's about what we have, and that would be across. We're a school divided into 3 divisions: a lower
Hmm.
school, which goes up through 5th grade from pre-K,
Okay.
which early childhood, is part of that, but it's has a little bit of a different sort of identity, obviously. And then our middle school is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And our high school, which we call our upper school, is 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And we're an independent school. So we pull from lots of different geographic areas. I think our latest number that we've said is we pull from 117 zip codes. And that's in the state
Oh.
of New Jersey, most northern New Jersey, mostly, some a little bit further south, and also New York,
Mm.
including New York City. About 20% of our students actually come from New York City. Mostly probably Manhattan, but also some of the other boroughs of New York City as well. So we have quite a population of different students, and we like to say we say this a lot of time in talking with people that we're an intentional community. People come to Dwight-Englewood. I mean, it's a private school, independent school. They're paying tuition to if they choose to come. They're giving up something. They're certainly giving up their money and having to travel, maybe not going to school in their local town, their local area, because they choose to be part of the community. So that gives us, the ability to have an identity, through our mission statement, and to have folks say that they buy into it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. Why would they choose to come? So that's one of the nice things, I guess, about independent schools. No disrespect to my colleagues in public schools. Actually, I was a public school child my entire life, except for
Same
college.
here. Yeah.
But one of the advantages I've seen in independent schools is that, you sort of opt in and kind of buy into, to what the school says they believe in.
So if I understand, if we come back to like your role, your position at the school, this was something that I mean, if you went back in time, was this like where you are now? Is that where you thought you would be? I'm just thinking like in terms of the development of that you described here, or was it more of like that your interest for technologies kind of just kept pushing you forward, or what got you to this point, or what kept you burning?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've been doing this for so long, it's pretty much been my career that it certainly wasn't like I sat back in high school and decided I wanted to go into technology. In fact, I think I was interested in law. I was going to major in political science actually when I went to the university I went to. I took one class of that and I was like, not that engaging, for me at least. I think what I really got into, and it's probably what got me to technology and I still like this today, is I like being a problem solver.
Mhm.
Um, Now those problems have changed. When I was more on the infrastructure side and IT side of things, those problems were fairly discrete, and all the times people brought you those problems, like here's a problem I need you to solve type of thing. That still happens on occasion. I mean, I'm part of the department who does that. My office is actually there with those folks, and I certainly do that as well. I'll help teachers out in that way, although it's not my primary job responsibility. But now the problems are a little bit, I don't know, more esoteric, or sometimes I have to, kind of have to identify that and plug in. I try to stay connected with, probably get into this more later, but like relationships is really important.
Mhm.
I try to keep up with what teachers sort of, what are the things, their challenges, and what are their priorities? What are the things, they're concerned about? And then if I can see where technology might help them along the way with that, like that's the problem, I guess, that, help apply and help them solve. So as far as my background, yeah, I mean, I guess it's just kind of like, being a problem solver. And I also like, I don't know if saying I like change would be appropriate or not. It might be, but I certainly like new experiences. And technology is, is constantly changing. So I'm constantly having to keep up with new experiences and be exposed to new experiences and do new things, the latest being, generative AI, for example, which I spent the last year and a half since the day it came out. With that, we're piloting 2 projects, generative AI at the school right now. I've personally dealt with that a little bit. This week, I'll probably be doing some data analysis using some AI tools, because I've done a little bit of that as well for it's kind of a survey project that I did. So I guess it's kind of a combination of problem solving and innovation, and just having not doing the same thing all the time. I've been to school for, so like I said, many years, but I've done lots of different things during that time. I've had a couple different positions as well. But even within my current job title, which I've had now for, I think it's almost 15 years, 10 years, something like that, I've still been able, to do different things. And plus, there's a people piece of it too. I like working people. So that technology, maybe that's the instructional side to a certain extent, is it gives me a chance to really kind of partner with and work with, with teachers and other people, as opposed to, I'm definitely not the like network manager who is excellent at their job, but is more interested in making sure that everything's running okay. Doesn't really want to deal with the end users, as much coming in, dealing with stuff. That's, I guess I get energy from working with folks.
Yeah. But I think that in the role that you have, that you have to act as this intermediary, and or a spokesperson for both the technology side of things, and also the pedagogy side of things. Of course, it becomes this interaction and communication, and I think we can jump into that now. That sounds like a huge part of what you do on the day-to-day. In that, like you were describing a little bit about the groups and the individuals that you meet, and trying to figure out what their problems are. I guess maybe we can just jump straight into it. Well, like, do you see that as like as one of the main roles that you have as the associate director of technology for academics? Is it that, or am I like totally off in my interpretation? This person that acts as the communicator between.
So I do a fair amount of that, in that if I identify something that is a challenge or maybe has room for improvement, I'll try to bring it to my department. But I will say I work with a bunch of colleagues who have a lot of experience in independent schools. I mean, the most junior member of our department, I think they've been there 4 or 5 years now, and the next is probably 8 or 10. I mean, and then beyond that as well. So also in an independent school, and in many organizations, but we're 1,000 students is pretty big for a private school, for an independent school, but it's not big for a school. I mean, if you take a look at like a lot of public districts and things like that. So we wear many hats. So like I said, I use the example of a network manager who would rather be dealing with optimizing systems. Our network manager actually does a bunch of other stuff as well that has him working with with people. So it's not so much like maybe like a large corporation where you've got the development team. Right. And you've got the sort of customer facing people, and you need somebody to kind of like go in between of that. I do a little bit of that, but everybody in my department can talk to people and kind of understand. So it's not like they need to have me just do that. But that said, most of the people in my department don't focus on the instructional side. They have plenty to do to keep it running. And I mean, if they didn't do what they did, I couldn't do anything. So one of the things I'm very appreciative of is we have a really rock solid infrastructure. We have very dedicated professionals in my department who keep things running and look to make things better. That's the plumbing is very strong. I say that because people think about technology infrastructure sometimes as like they don't think about it until something goes wrong. Like your plumbing.
Exactly.
It's very it's more complicated than that. Although I can't do plumbing. But like our team does a great job, with that, the other members of the team who work on the tech side. So I do a little bit of that. It's kind of, for me, so I wouldn't say this is my job. A major thing I do to do my job is relationship building. I wasn't hired, the position wasn't created, here, you're going to go build relationships with people. But anybody who does what I do, and I have colleagues at other schools that I'm in touch with through online forums and conferences, like you mentioned, we might see each other at the New York Association of Independent School Technologists and Librarians Conference, the NEAT conference. They have similar things. Anybody who's relatively successful in doing this kind of work really has to build relationships with faculty members. And the thing that's challenging about that is they don't have a lot of time, and they certainly don't have a lot of contact time for other adults in school.
Yeah, because that's exactly what I was going to ask. I'm like, I can count like on the on these two hands like the number of times where I ask the teacher like, hey, do you have 5 minutes that we can talk about this? And they're like, yes. Otherwise it's like, no, I'm in the middle. I got to go run off to class. I got to do this. I got to prep these things. I got to there's these students that I have to meet later on. So I can imagine that's a trick to get that to work. That
Yeah,
relationship building.
that
Yeah.
is. Yeah. You kind of have to meet people where they are and where they're going
Mm-hmm.
to be. And also there's a fair amount of just in time.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody need, and this I guess goes back to the problem solving a little bit. When somebody needs to do something, you want to be, and they might use a digital tool to help, to help do that, or a technique using technology to help do that. You need to kind of be ready to help them when they're ready to get the help. Now, and that's not, I mean, I work, during the school day. It's not like I'm talking to people 8 o'clock at night. A lot of our teachers are certainly doing prep and stuff like that. But I mean, you have to draw lines professionally to have a life beyond work. But for example, I try to produce resources that people can get to either asynchronously. I make myself available to be scheduled to come into a class. And when I go visit a class, I can work in, I guess it's 3 or 4 different ways, I guess, to think of it. One is I can come in and guest teach a class. I've done that, guest teach a lesson. I can come in and be a TA to the teacher, who's teaching the class. I can come in and be just sort of sitting in the room nearby. So if they're doing something and the teacher is leading that, they can go to me for support, kind of like the TA, but not even actively involved, just sitting in the back of the room in case something comes up. And I can also just be on call, like around the corner, if a teacher wants to kind of take this on their own, doesn't want me in the classroom. That doesn't happen that often, this method, but I'll just be around the corner and they can hit me with a text message or something like that. And then I can come in and provide some support. Usually that would be a technical, type thing. So, that's one way, meeting teachers to make sure they've got somebody available. And that's also one of the reasons why I don't teach a lot myself. When I have taught a class, it's never usually more than one class. It's usually some sort of elective or minor class. It doesn't meet as often, because what I found is the more I teach, the less available I am to teachers when they're available. So that's a double-edged sword a little bit as well, because it's good every once in a while for me to get back in the classroom, because then it reminds me, not that I intellectually I understand of the challenges that teachers have and the things they're dealing with, but it's good every once in a while for me to actually be in there and have to do classroom management and have to deal with our students doing their homework and have to deal with assessment, and all those things. So I go back and forth. Like
The fun stuff. Yeah.
I didn't teach this year. I didn't teach. Oh no, I taught last year. I didn't teach this year. I'm not going to teach next year, because we got some leadership changes and stuff happening at the schools. I need to dedicate things towards that. But yeah, so it's just sort of doing that. And also our faculty at different divisions, and I work primarily with our middle school and our high school. So they at our middle school, they work very strongly across grade levels and grade bands. The teachers, like, for the most, like, a lot of the sixth grade teachers only teach sixth grade. A lot of seventh graders only teach seventh grade, and you teach eighth grade. Especially amongst the English, science, math, and history courses. We have language teachers who cross and some arts teachers who cross different grade levels. But those teachers of those 4 disciplines, which we call MESH, because that's the math,
Okay.
English,
Yeah.
science, and those MESH teachers, they will meet on a twice a week basis to plan out stuff they have going on, because there's things that they do that are cross departmental. So I actually I used to attend every week, but that's a little bit too much for 3 grade levels. That's a lot of meetings. But I attend at least once a month, or if they ask me to come in for something particular. And then they also take notes at all those meetings, and I read them on a weekly basis. Like, I have a tickler on my calendar that I read all 3 grade levels notes on a weekly basis. So that's another thing. So I'm there to hear what is going on for them.
Yeah.
And honestly, 80% of a meeting or 70% of a meeting, it's not unusual that really it doesn't directly apply to my job, but it does give me some background. And if I am there, I can answer a question, or I can say, have you thought about this? where I can come back and talk to a teacher who mentioned some concern later that maybe it wasn't appropriate to bring up in the entire group, but I can pull them aside later and say, oh, I heard you mention this, in this meeting, or I saw this in the notes. Is this something that might be useful to you?
Yeah.
So that's the way I kind of access, teachers who have very limited time. Works well in the middle school, a little harder in our upper school or high school because it's much more, department focused and siloed's too strong of a word, but it's organized solely around departments. And those teachers don't meet quite as often together. They sometimes will meet if they teach the same course. Those 2 or 3 teachers might meet together,
Right.
but I'm not formally plugged into those. So that's a challenge that I've been working with the last few years, is trying to get a little bit more connected with my upper school colleagues.
Yeah, but it's interesting because it sounds, I mean, in what you're talking about here is that you have different strategies depending on which teachers you're interacting with. So you have some strategies where you're going to like sort of sit back and let information come into you. So like you said or described now, where you have these notes from their subject meetings or the year meeting. What do you want to call it? I can only think of the Swedish word right now.
They're grade level meetings.
Grade level meetings. Yeah, thank you. So you have these grade level meetings, and you're collecting in this information and processing it, and then also trying to find like, where are the diamonds in the rough? Where can I add and make things more accessible or more available, or maybe contribute to how they're developing. But then you also have strategies here that you're talking to us about, where you're actually out and like seeking teachers or trying to find them in their day to day to a certain degree. Because I don't know.
But yeah, and also
Yeah,
participating in classes. So because one question that popped up listening to you, Bill, is just to get a better understanding of how you work and how the school is functioning. So how much would you say is digital in terms of like lessons, like in average? Are the students bringing their devices to all classes pretty much, or is it what's the setup?
Sure. Yeah, so we are it varies a little bit by division. In our upper school, our grades 9 through 12, high school in the United States, all students are expected to have a laptop computer that they bring with them. They can purchase through the school a Mac. We happen to use, Apple Macs, so at the moment it's MacBook Pros. But they can also bring their own if they want. And we probably have maybe 20% of the students who choose their own computer and bring that. In those classes, I would say use of technology is not necessarily happening quite as frequently as it is in the middle school, which we'll talk about in a second. But it definitely does happen. And it needs to be there and available. So if a teacher wants to use digital tools, they can do that. Some students do take notes digitally. That's not something that's like you're supposed to take notes digitally. It kind of depends on the teacher in the high school class, to decide. They manage the classroom. So sometimes they ask students to close screens, to not do that sort of thing. Laptops also, students are kind of a little bit hidden behind them, type of thing. So some teachers are using that. So there is a frequent use of digital tech, and it's used in very different ways, by different teachers. We are a school too where our teachers have a lot of autonomy in their classroom. So there are not too many, like, this is the way you do this things set up. It's kind of left to our teachers, who are professionals and, to judge what's best for their students in their class, to the point where we can even have a class, 2 different classes, the same class taught by 2 different teachers. And you're not going to see a lockstep in those 2 classes. I mean, they're going to cover the same curriculum, the same basic skills, the big things, certainly. But, they may do it a slightly different way. And then on the middle school side, we are 1-to-1 grades 6 through 8 with iPads. All students have iPads. They do bring them to every single class. They have them out frequently, not all the time, because again, one problem with digital technology, it's a distraction. At times it's got lots of power, but it's also a distraction. So, teachers also manage their classrooms there. But that happens there. And then, and though, by the way, the 6th through 12th graders, those devices, they take home with them. They're actually their devices. They purchase them through the school, but they're their devices. And then below that, 5th grade down, there's a combination of Chromebooks and iPads used, to where we basically have machines allocated to them in their classrooms. They don't own them, they don't take them home, but it is 1-to-1. Maybe not at the absolute youngest ages. We don't want kids on screens that much anyway. But pretty much technology is readily available whenever teachers want it. We're not in a place where we were years ago, where you need to sign up for the computer lab or you need to sign up the cart. Like in our lower school, actually, it was we had carts down there, but it wasn't one-to-one. And basically, COVID kind of changed that because we ended up needing to make sure every kid, even some of the youngest kids, had a device at home that they could connect to, because their siblings were using other devices, their parents were working from home.
Yeah.
So we sort of ended up going, maybe we were 2-to-1. We ended up 1-to-1 in a lot of grades in lower school, and stuck with that. So that way the technology is readily available to a teacher when they want to use it with students.
Okay, that's great. And I think one of the objectives for these kind of discussions that we have now is to have some experience sharing, because we get a lot of questions, obviously, from schools, and we know that schools are connected with each other, and that word of mouth is really a thing between when you decide what you want to test, what you want to implement in the schools and so on. So maybe just to develop a little bit from that. So with your great experience, like how do needs and ideas pop up from maybe the classroom, from the teachers, or maybe from your perspective, and then when you have those like needs and questions and maybe requirements, how do you filter and work and evaluate to look at the vendors, the platforms? How is that process looking?
So a lot of that, so a couple different ways. One is a group that I didn't mention, which is I do work with a group of middle school faculty and a separate group of upper school faculty called Technology Liaisons, who opt into a formal program that they meet with me on a regular basis. I can talk more about that in a minute. So some will come through those tech liaisons. They're sort of representatives of either their grade level or their department, with ideas. And part of their work during the school year is to try things out and report on it in a little more formal basis. And I meet with them monthly on that. So I can get to that in a second. And then the quicker answer is for sort of the faculty at large. And what will happen there is somebody wants to try to do something. If it's a case of, like I said, I hear something in a meeting, or I'm aware of challenges or needs, I bring those to people. But sometimes it'll be somebody coming to me and be like, I want to do this, or can you help me learn how to use this? So many things are available in kind of a freemium model, online service, especially available online, where people will try things out. I won't even necessarily know they're trying things, but they might want a little bit of additional help how to do a particular thing. So one of the first things that I do when I speak with anybody about that sort of thing is they come, they're like, could you help me use XYZ? I can't get it to do, whatever, or can it do whatever? And I almost always stop and kind of back up and be like, can you tell me what it is you want to accomplish? Like, what's your goal? And they start talking about the software again, and sometimes, and I'll be like, no, let's not talk about the technology and talk about the software. Tell me what it is you want to accomplish. And then we can get into what technology tool might help that. What you're bringing and saying you want help with might be the thing, and I'll certainly be happy to help you with that. But there also might be something else that either meets the need better, or that we're already using at the school, and there's other colleagues using it. I mean, one of the big things about standardizing on tools, we're not a school that tells people you have to use this, you have to use that in very many cases, maybe some certain situations. But one of the advantages is if a group of colleagues are using the same thing, they can provide peer support. And that gets back to the just in time. Teachers don't have a lot of time. They can't attend a workshop. They don't necessarily have time to even meet with me sometimes. I mean, I try to make myself available, so I'm happy to do that with them. But they turn around to the teacher who they share an office with, or the teacher in the classroom next door. And if people are using the same things, then it's easier to answer questions. So that's going to be part of how we select services and vendors and things that we do, is what are we already using. Another piece of that is we want this experience to be fairly seamless, for both teachers and for students.
Yeah.
And there's a quote from a guy named Chris Lehmann. I don't know if you've ever heard of Chris Lehmann, and he's a United States educator. He's one of the founders of I think it's officially a charter school, or actually it's a magnet school in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, called Science Leadership Academy, which is a pretty cool school if you learn about them. But he said, I'm going to read this so I don't get this quote wrong, but technology should be like oxygen, ubiquitous, necessary, and invisible. And that is something I kind of really believe in. To improve teaching and learning, tech can't have a whole bunch of hoops you have to jump through in order to use. So another piece is trying to identify and use solutions that are easy for people to use. And one of the biggest barriers to people using technology sometimes is just logging in.
Yeah.
Don't know my password, I don't know what username. I mean, that sort of thing. It seems like a silly thing, but I'm sure you've experienced this.
Been there, done that. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's a huge barrier. So a simple thing at our school is, we have pretty much everything set up to do single sign-on.
Mm.
It all goes to a backend that's running Azure for Microsoft. It connects to Active Directory. Also, our Google services connect to that. So any tool that we use, I really want to see, unless there's a really compelling reason to use it, and there's not another alternative, I want to see that they log in and it has like a sign in with Google button, or it
Yeah.
just automatically will, use our authentication that we have through our LMS and SIS, which is what we do at Digiexam, for example, to where basically that sign in is handled. And then on the back end of things too, there's the whole account creation and stuff like that. So there is a piece of, and this is the stuff that the teachers don't need to worry about. If it works well, it makes them happy and it makes it usable for them. But this is, I guess, John, you mentioned that, my sort of background coming from a technology point of view,
Oh,
where I guess that helps, because I do understand enough about the tech, and I still keep up with that to where I understand that, SSO is important and how it could work and how we might have to synchronize class rosters and do that sort of thing, so teachers don't have to like create classes by hand. That's the piece that I'll look for and try to make sure something like that is available.
yeah. Because it feels like, I mean, I think that's a great quote that you took up, and I think that's a really, it's a great, and also a great philosophy when it comes to technologies, and choosing the right technologies versus choosing, or I'll put it right in the air quotes, the right versus the wrong, in that, I also think about the administrative aspect of it. If you have these technologies that don't play nice with each other, that aren't like, invisible, and always working and just kind of there, of course it requires a lot of like work for individuals that are setting these things up, but when they're done correctly, it reduces the overall load. It might be an upfront, like, okay, we have to invest 20 hours in getting this thing set up and making sure that everything is like, spick and span, all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted along the way. But afterwards, you're just like, you can like fire and forget. And I usually think of it as like, you're almost like a magician at the end of the day. If everything went right, nobody knows how the trick was done. It's just like, hooray, it worked. Everything's cool. And your teachers are super happy, and, they get to go home with whatever the bouquet that you pulled out of the hat or whatever.
As long as it's easy enough to use, because
Yes.
otherwise they're gonna come back with questions.
Yeah, exactly.
It also reduces the workload of my colleagues in my department as well, because something that we can set up and forget for the most part, which includes things like automatic account provisioning, based on Azure, directory backend and stuff like that, and the SSO, like that helps that too, because having to every year, take a CSV file, a spreadsheet file and import accounts to create accounts and do things like that. Like, yeah, it's not like a huge amount of work, but times however many tools you have, that gets to be a lot.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's kind of related. So it's good for the students. It's good for the teachers. It's also good for the IT professionals. So I mean, it's a win-win when you find something that does those things.
Yeah. And I mean, we had written down something. Maybe this is a good like thing to ask about. It was like I think you're in on this, like deciding what a good academic technology or educational technology is, and then the whole like stickiness of that. And I guess I'm talking about stickiness in the sense that like that your teachers want to use it. Like the IT department is totally secure with this and satisfied. I mean, is there like a I don't know, the yellow brick road? Is there like a perfect path, or is it just, okay, some are just better than others, and I mean, maybe it's the sign in, maybe it's the account provisioning or the account lifecycle handling, or the integration with other systems. I don't know. What do you have what's your feel? What's your take on it?
Yeah, so all those things that we just talked about are to a certain extent necessary conditions for something to be sticky in that respect, but they're not necessarily sufficient. As Carl kind of said too, you've got something that have all that integration, and if it has a lousy interface or it's confusing, it's not going to stick. So obviously that's important. Tools need to be somewhat intuitive or provide a lot of just-in-time, easy to access support, in the tool for somebody, if you're talking about like an online tool for somebody to use. But the other key piece, and this is where those tech liaisons also come in that I mentioned briefly, answer the last question. Another key piece is, it has to be useful, and which sounds obvious, but people don't know something's useful until they've invested some time into trying it. And not everybody has time to try it. So a big thing are teachers who have some reason, some motivation to give something a try, either because they really see the potential in it and they think it's really going to help their teaching and help student learning, or they're excited about it for whatever reason. They actually use that, and then they share their experiences with their colleagues. And then when colleagues hear experiences from other teachers of similar disciplines, similar courses, or where they can see connections, like that's what really makes something kind of stick and take off. So as I said, we're not a school that mandates or restricts a lot of what teachers try to do. Teachers have a lot of leeway in their classroom, which is not uncommon for, I think, for a lot of independent schools. Although I feel like we're probably we're kind of on the edge of teacher freedom, like, to one side quite a bit, which is a double-edged sword. It's great for innovation and wonderful teaching and keeping great teachers at our schools well. But, it's got some challenges sometimes too with, 10 people using 10 different things is an example. But as a result, and because so many, when you talk about digital technology and educational technology, so many tools are readily available and easily available to use, a free version of them or some whatever version of it, we will get a lot of people trying things. So they try things, and if it turns out that they try something and it really works for them, and they show some colleagues and it works for those colleagues, then to a certain extent, what I need to do is I need to look at this and say, hey, this is something we better think, maybe we need to think about adopting. Or at least I need to support it in some way. If it's something that it turns out the free version is good enough, and it checks the box as far as, protecting student privacy and, that sort of thing. And, there's like a sign with Google button, which is the way a lot of free stuff kind of uses SSO. It's not, we're not doing anything sophisticated on the back end, but there's just sort of signing with Google makes it easy, or signing with Microsoft. Then okay, then I'll maybe start to build some help resources. But it's kind of got to take off. We have to have teachers use things. And in all honesty, most of the things that we've ended up adopting and using, maybe all of them, have come from a couple of teachers starting to use something, sharing a positive experience with colleagues, and them using it more. And once I see that, when we talk about having to spend money on things, like we want to get an enterprise version or whatever, because it makes sense, it makes it much easier to make a case for doing that. And my boss, who controls the budget, I don't actually control budget. Our director of technology controls budget. But for the most part, by the time I go to him with some service or something that's like, this would be good, I kind of know, unless, we just don't have the money, allocated, there's no way to do it or plan it for next year, that it's probably going to be a yes, because I've already got a bunch of faculty who are kind of invested in doing this. But you do have the piece of not, duplicating things, not paying for 3 things that kind of do the same thing the same way. And that kind of falls to me to keep an eye on that, to kind of know what's going on with regards to that.
So I'm just trying to think of the way that you're working with technologies, and sort of the technologies that maybe stick more often than others is almost like, it sounds very organic, like an organic growth. Teachers, bottom up approach, teachers start using this, they start getting interested, it spreads a little bit, and that's where, like, again, probably through getting this information from subject group meetings or from year group meetings, that all of a sudden, okay, now I need to act on this and jump in and see what this is. Maybe not what this is about, but how can I support them? Because I think, I don't know, I think that's interesting in the sense that some schools choose that whole like top-down approach. Okay, we are going to use these tools, the end. You must. Whereas you're describing something maybe completely the opposite of that, where that you have these professionals in their classrooms experimenting and exploring, and you're along the way as a professional, but with maybe your insight into what technologies actually can deliver.
Yeah, and then you have an open like culture of sharing experiences, which is not always the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what we see from many schools is that if we go back like from when we started, or I started with Digiexam 2014, I remember that the case was very often that a school is testing stuff, because if we look at the different sequences, or the evolvement or development of tech in schools, is that first we set the infrastructure, we concentrate on getting this 2-to-1 or 1-to-1 set up, and then we start to fill these devices with different technologies and platforms, and then we had the pandemic and other outside events that, of course, with timing and from different periods, can affect what kind of strategy or how open we are to test new things, or what kind of problem we need to solve. But I think it's a really interesting perspective, like comparing that open-minded, like teachers can try, they can innovate, and then because you're very secure in knowing that, okay, good examples are going to be shared, and we know that we have when we have adoption, we have enough ease of use, and people like it, then it's going to get sticky. Meanwhile, others that we see often as well, as you say, John, they have maybe a more top-down, like connected to a strategy, but problem with that, it's has a good part of it, but the problem maybe is that you would miss things, because you're very, even though you have tested everything and you have a very direct process of bringing new stuff into the school, you still need the teachers, because they need to say what they like and approve and put it in the classroom. So I think it's interesting, those two kind of different ways of doing stuff, and apparently it's working good for you.
Yeah, there are some instances where teachers want a solution for something, and Digiexam would be an example of that. We're looking for a secure digital testing solution, back when and to a certain extent, there will be certain things if they have a fairly particular need that they meet. So maybe a little less sort of open-ended, tools like the Google Workspace suite is a huge open, you can use it for so many different things, right? In different ways. Something like that grassroots is going to be a little bit more important. Although we are Google Apps for Education, we're Workspace School or whatever. So we've adopted that institutionally. I guess that was kind of top down. But when you meet a certain need, for example, the secure testing need, to a certain extent, the teachers won't have strong opinions as long as we find something that kind of works okay. Like there's not going to be, I want to use this and I want to use that. Also, in that particular space, for example, there's not, I mean, there are other products out there, but there's not like a huge, and it's also not like an online thing you can just use for free. So in some cases, the top-down approach does have some value in that respect. But that said, there still needs to be a piece where teachers have input on that. And since you folks from Digiexam, we'll talk about Digiexam as an example. It's a good example. We tried, this is one of the tech liaisons who are, in the case of our upper school, represent departments, and they work with me on a regular basis. A secure testing solution was something that actually he brought up a few years ago. This one tech liaison, he's not currently tech liaison. It's kind of a people turn over that role every once in a while. We tried a different secure testing platform, and he wasn't intuitive. It was a little confusing. Didn't like it quite as much. So if we had picked the other thing and just said top down, this is what we're going to use, we might have had people who weren't as happy about it. So then I don't remember if Digiexam was our second or third one that we tried. I think it was our second. He liked the product. It seemed to work well. He used it with his classes. He tried it out. He had a couple of colleagues try it out and they liked it. And again, it came from, so even though something like a product like Digiexam, we would have to decide sort of top down on that because of the way licensing works, and we're not going to, license lots of different things, and the deployment and the setup and that whole thing. There was a little bit of I guess it's kind of a pilot program to a certain extent. Like that became important. So even if we top down something, we want to make sure that it is piloted with educators who are actually going to use it on a regular basis and get their feedback and make sure it meets their needs. Otherwise, we can pay and say this is the thing you use, and it won't get used, and it's a waste of money.
Yeah.
Right. That's it's interesting in the sense that you talked about that there's certain tools that fill a need or have a niche that they're going to do well with. But then, Carl, you had a question about stickiness that you wanted to maybe see if we can dig a little bit deeper into.
Yeah, I was interested in understanding, like, what's the outcome that you're looking for, or what's your take and experience in terms of understanding the result or the outcome of a specific technology or in general, because that's still going to be the decisive factor, since if we can solve a problem, good, but it could be for a short period, it could be connected to something external or something, and the need can of course change. We've agreed that ease of use is a key factor, and you obviously, as described, have a good process of testing stuff and get it spread out in the school. But as the next step, like, what would be the expected outcome of not necessarily a digital exam platform, but in general?
Yeah, so I'd like to say, but I won't, that there'd be some sort of metrics that we could very easily look at. But in education, while some schools, do have standardized tests and do use those as metrics, and there's a lot of debate about that, whether that's a valuable measure or not. Independent schools generally do not do a lot of that. So, how do we judge that? And now, so I can only speak from sort of the I perspective in my school, like an independent school perspective, because we don't have, a lot of sort of those kinds of metrics. How do we judge that we have a student was successfully educated? Forget about technology.
Right.
How does a student come through my class or come through our school, and we know that there was a success, in their education? And there's not a particular thing you can tie that to. I mean, one of the things we can look at, we are a college preparatory school. So, if you go through our school and graduate 12th grade, if you don't leave earlier, which some students might leave before high school or leave before middle school or whatever, we don't have a lot of flow, out, but we do have, we have some people move different things too. So we can look at, are they successful in college? And that's a little bit out of my area. I don't know actually if we actually survey our students with regards to like their academic success. I do know we have a lot of anecdotal information. My son actually, one of my sons actually graduated from the school and is currently in college. So I have firsthand anecdotal information. So we do hear back from students that, they were able to write well in school. They're able to like think well in school, to understand, to take note, to those sorts of things. So this is seems not really answering your question directly, but I think what ends up happening is it's sort of the same thing for an educational technology. It can't really say exactly like, did it have a big impact? But the culture is such that we're not doing ROI calculations on things, because with education, I mean, what I taught an 8th grade introduction to computer science class last year. And the impact that I had on those students, very small class, but I don't know, did I have much impact? Like they learned something, they seemed to enjoy the experience. That's kind of what I can judge. Take those 8th graders after they've either went to college or even outside of college. So first, they get out of high school. I mean, I could look at, did they take programming classes in high school? Do they end up doing something with technology in college? Do they do something outside of college 8 years from now where that spark something they're interested? I don't know. And that's really hard to measure. So I think it's kind of a similar sort of thing with you when you talk about any sort of teaching tool or educational technology. So that said, the way that I kind of have to look at it is, if teachers are using the tool, just like I have to trust, and the administration of our school has to trust that teachers, I mean, certainly there's supervision, there's department chairs, people looking at things. It's not completely left up to the teacher closing the door and you have no idea what they did in their room. But We have to
What?
trust that the teachers in our school are actually, preparing kids
Yeah.
properly for whatever that next step is, in life or in schooling. Uh, I, if teachers feel that the digital technology tools that they are using are valuable in their teaching and they're helping to improve teaching and learning, then I kind of have to just assume that it is. And I can look at usage though. So I mean, sort of one way that I would, and things do change. One of the ways I would look at something, and this is where when you talk about features of products, not that it's going to be the only factor, but I very much want to be able to have analytics, whether I can go look myself, whether I can ask the company to provide something to me where I can see usage by teachers and not just who logged in, but how often,
Right.
like how many
Right.
students, how many things there were, that sort of thing. So I feel like at the moment, the best I can do is see if stuff is getting use.
Mm.
And I used to do that more anecdotally, but that's hard. So I like to at least, when I take a look at analytics, and is it worth, continuing to pay for the service? If it's a service that's paid, if it's free, I mean, it doesn't really matter. We can kind of sit there and people can use it. So that's kind of the decision. Now, that's not to say we don't do certain things like we something we actually started doing in our middle school and our high school a couple of years ago was an engagement index that twice a year we ask students to actually report back to their teachers um, how challenging a class was, sort of on a scale of challenging to not challenging,
Mm.
how much they enjoy the class from I hate the kind of that really dislike the class or hate the class to I really love the class. And that gives you sort of an engagement value if you have one's an
Yeah.
x-axis,
Yeah.
one's a y-axis. We're not currently using that as a way to rate teachers. We're not currently even using it right now as a way to rate programs. At the moment, we're using it as a way for teachers to get feedback from students. Our principals aren't even looking at that data other than maybe an aggregate. They're not looking at individual teacher data right now. Maybe down the road, we might do something like that. But like that's a kind of, I guess that's a little bit of an indicator. You could use something like that. But can I tie a particular tool or teaching method to that? Probably not, unless a class is all about using just a couple of things, Um, there are too many variables, I guess. So not a great answer, but that's kind of where we are. So it just sort of kind of have to have a feel for it and look at usage.
Yeah, but I think it's good because what you do is that you touch upon a different couple of things. Like we talk a lot about
Mm.
like how can we or could the use of data or understanding and analyze the stuff that we put into these platforms, could that help, to add more value, which is something we discuss a lot internally because as you mentioned, Bill, like teaching and learning increase or increase quality,
Yeah. Yeah.
fortify, enhance, and so on. And what can you get from looking at the things that you just mentioned? Okay, if the usage is high, if the usage when things and the need change over time still is high, or if the usage has been widened or is broader now compared to previous period, are teachers like inventing new ways to use the platform, either themselves or together with a company like us, providing new features and new ways of using it? That's great, but by the end of the day, if you could understand that, let's take Digiexam as an example. Like the way you ask a question to your students, the way you test what they know, that kind of information can, of course, help or should probably help to get a good picture of, are we doing the right stuff here, and are we increasing or making the quality better here at the school in terms of how we teach and what the students are supposed to learn. So yeah, I think you touched upon that. And then otherwise, I think, yeah, I agree. Like some schools may use a lot of metrics, kind of the ones that you mentioned. Others they don't. Are we keeping our staff? Can we attract new staff? How does this affect ranking, or can we help students be more successful and so on? But I'd say quality in the teaching offering. That's probably what we look for.
Yeah, and I mean, you said my favorite word, analytics. God, let's not go there. But I think that there's, I mean, certainly in your role, sort of a higher up perspective, looking at usage statistics or usage analytics. How often is this tool being used versus others? And then of course in what ways. I mean, the more detailed the information you can get out of the system, like you said, login data isn't super relevant, but I want to see, what did the teacher do when they were logged in? Did they create, if we're going to take Digiexam, did they create an exam? Did they, did they launch that thing? Is it ongoing? Did they grade it? What was the final result? Can I aggregate that data? That's where it gets really, really fun, and exciting. And then I think also for teachers, I think that also maybe, touches upon what they're interested in the pedagogical side of it. That, yeah, if I can get statistics back, or if I can get, some sort of overview of how my class did right after we did something, that of course adds incredible value to them, because then you're taking something that potentially could be summative and turning it into something that's actually formative without having to like work hard for it, and spend, I can only speak from my own experience, but this was before, like, having automated marking and things like that. But I mean, marking student assignments, it took forever. It was a nightmare, even if it was like multiple choice, kind of things that I was throwing in there, just to like quiz them on simple stuff like an exit ticket. Whereas, you can turn that around, and now you have technology in your hands that provides you that feedback right away, and analytically provides you that feedback over time as well. So I don't know. I think oh
John, maybe you should be a
yeah.
teacher again when
Yeah.
AI is going to be implemented to
we keep
create
saying that,
exams and
yeah.
mark and grading.
We keep saying that. I don't know. Maybe we'll see if I can do one of those 80-20 kind of roles at the office here.
No, you're
So,
you're on with that, because that's one of the things, as I said, as anybody in education probably is at least at some level looking at, is the whole AI piece, right? So
Sure.
we're piloting two tools right now. One of them is a student-facing tool, and one of the interesting things about it, I don't know whether we'll continue to use it next year or not. It's a paid product. One of the interesting things about it is, after students have a chat with a chat bot that's sort of created by the teacher with some parameters and learning objectives and things in it, the teacher does get back exactly what you talked about, which is interesting, in that they get back, once there's been at least 5 or 6 students who have actually done the assignment, they get back on, these are the areas of strength from the discussions your students have. These are the areas of improvement. Here's a possible follow-up feedback lesson. Click this button, and it actually will generate another sort of AI tutor. That's not something that I realize that stuff's been talked about for a long time, but I hadn't really seen that in use. It wasn't easy to kind of get at.
Yeah.
So we're sort of using, for example, this AI chatbot tool that, we're taking a look at. But that does feel like the kind of thing that a lot of products, or a lot of different things that do different things could possibly bring to teachers. And I suspect there were places and there were schools where they have the structure set up, where there are individual professionals whose job is to look at a lot of those results. And probably maybe larger districts, for example, on the public side, there are people who look at that, and they help decide what the curriculum is, what things need to be focused on. Now, it may take them a year to do that, so it's not going to be right away. But speaking again from my perspective as an educator, in quasi administrator, I guess, in an independent school, we don't have that. We're not big enough to have somebody who does that. It's a big part of their job. Maybe we would make somebody do that. So getting individual teachers getting that information back is actually something that would have a lot, has a lot of value, I think.
Yeah, big time. I'm thinking it's that time saver. I would love to just dig in, because I mean, I think we're touching upon the SAMR like model in a lot of ways here in what we're talking about. What does the technology do? Why is it good? Why do we choose it? Why does it last? And Bill, you'd sent, like I said, you'd sent over these materials, and I was like, oh, this is fantastic. I'm like back in my element here. Do you want to take a minute to just kind of describe that? Because I think that also maybe will, put some background into like how academic technologies develop, or why we have the ones maybe we have today in our organizations without even realizing that we chose them.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the SAMR model I mentioned is just it's one model for taking a look at technology tools. There's a bunch of different ones,
Yeah.
and there's criticism of a lot of them, and I've read some of the criticism of this one as well. But I like it because it's fairly simple, and I
Mhm.
actually use it with teachers in a simpler way than it's actually structured. So the basic structure of it, as you may have seen, the SAMR stands for substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. Dr. Ruben Pentadura, who is not somebody, Pentadura, I think is proper pronunciation of his name. I've never seen him speak. I don't know anything about him. I only found out about him because this model a number of years ago ended up on sort of the ed tech online. I used to be very active on Twitter as far as that's how I got new ideas and learn things. Twitter's now X has kind of become a whole different thing, so I don't really engage that way anymore. But um, that's how I found out about this. And
Yeah.
the idea is, I think Dr. Puentedura originally structured this and presented this like 10 years ago as a ladder,
Mm.
which I don't completely agree with the ladder analogy, which is why there's a graphic that I like, which is this pool, which I
Yeah,
think I
we're
said.
we're gonna we're gonna get our head of marketing to display this graphic
Okay.
in here, so it'll be great. It's gonna be so much fun to see.
So the
But yeah, go
ladder
ahead.
would be, yeah, so the ladder would be substitution would be, the text, and you'll see from the graphic, if you're seeing the graphic on the screen and the pool in the bottom left-hand corner, it describes it. Substitution is the tech is a direct substitution
Mm.
for something. You take something that was analog or was paper and you do it digitally, and it's just digital. There's nothing else about it, right? Augmentation is the next level, and that there's a little bit of a functional improvement. Then you've got modification, where you can actually significantly redesign the task so it's done differently. And then finally is redefinition, which allows for the creation of a new task previously inconceivable. And an example of that, which is now dated, but I think when this was first coming out,
Mhm.
is, for example, a lot of teachers 10 years ago were into blogging, having their classes blog, and they were having students do writing. This would be more older students, more probably high school students were doing writing, and they were publishing on public blogs, so they had an authentic audience. And maybe some people actually engaged in commenting from outside of the school. And that's maybe you could argue against this, but I think that fits in kind of the redefinition model, and that it was creation of a task previously inconceivable. Like you couldn't have an international public reading your students' writing and commenting on it. Now,
Mm.
did that have big impacts on their learning? That's a whole nother thing. And that's one of the criticisms, I think, of this model, is just because you're at the redefinition stage, does it necessarily mean that the results are better? I don't know. As we just discussed a few minutes
Mm.
ago, it's
Right.
really hard to tell. So I'm not going to base everything on metrics, and I'm just, I'm going to kind of try to find ways of doing things that seem innovative. And right, innovation doesn't always mean that you had improvement, but you're trying something new. Hopefully in the long term it does. With regard to something like disruptive innovations, sometimes those are ones that start off really lousy and then end up being good, disrupting industry, like digital photography, for example. And
Mhm.
Kodak didn't jump on that bandwagon, and as a result, they're pretty much, do they even exist now? But if they do, very minorly, as opposed to, even though digital photography was lousy when it came out, but now it's like the thing. So the SAMR model, when I work with faculty, and this would be more faculty, again, I mentioned the tech liaisons, which are faculty who are actually signed on for a year to actually work with me, work in a group, a tech liaison group. There's two different groups. One's the middle school, one's the high school, upper school level. As a group, we meet once or twice a month. Individually, I meet with each tech liaison once a month. And what they do is at the beginning of the year, they actually set some goals, like one or two goals with some objectives using kind of the SMART goals model, so that, it's achievable, it has a date, there's something
Mm.
measurable, so they can look back and see that they've done stuff. And my monthly meetings with each individual are sort of, I look at the dates they set the dates. I don't set the goals. I don't set the dates. They set the dates. I just sort of, part of my job is a nag to be like, oh, you said you were gonna do this by January. How's it going?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't get to January. Fine. Pick a new date. As long as it's done by the end of the year, it's kind of fine. That's the commitment. So when I speak with, for example, people like, the tech liaisons who have opted into a position, which currently at our school is stipended, so it gives them a little bit more incentive to, in the 1,200 things that they have to do, this one gets a little higher up on the list because they've committed to this position, and they're getting a small, it's kind of a token, kind of a small stipend for it. When we talk about, okay, you want to use some tech tools, types of things. So one of the things I do is I talk about this model. And if you look at the swimming pool diagram again, there's a substitution augmentation. And this was not from Pentadura. This was from a guy named Carl Hooker, who actually made, it was an educator who actually made the pool version, which is why I like this pool version. There's the enhancement end, which is, kind of on the left, the substitution augmentation side, and there's the transformative deep end. And really, I kind of just talk about it in those two things. It's like trying a new technology tool. And obviously, it's going to provide some sort of enhancement. It's got to provide some value. Why are you bothering? Even if it's free, why are you bothering a learning curve, that sort of thing? So there's still value in that. There's nothing wrong with using tools that, do that. But when I talk with technology liaisons, especially if they've been doing the program for a couple of years, one of the things I may say is try to think about, this tool in sort of the transformative deep end, like the modification or redefinition. Like this will let you do something in either a very significantly different way, or to allow your student to do something that you just previously couldn't do. And an example, an easy example, low-hanging fruit that comes to mind are these AI chatbots.
Right.
You could not have a student work independently with a tutor on their particular thing they're trying to understand, like an entire class, and then maybe share that with the teacher to get the teacher's feedback, because you really got to have a human in there, because we know the chat hallucinate, and they're not always 100% accurate, but that would not have been possible without technology. Because you can't hire a tutor for every single kid, and we're lucky, independent school, we have classes of about 18 is our max. But even there, you can't have 18 people each individually working with each student for a class period. You can have a teacher who goes around and talks to each student, and we do that, but you can't quite have that same level. So that's one of the ways we kind of take a look at like using the technology. And especially, I'm kind of I guess a big fan just from experience, in that we get a lot of mileage out of sort of blank slate tools that you can do a lot of different things with. There are certainly value in tools that are very purpose-driven for a particular purpose, but a lot of the stuff that we use a lot of can be used for many, many different ways. So it's not necessarily even about choosing a tool when you look at this SAMR model, but it's about like how you're going to use technology. Like if you're going to use it, try to think about uses that are in this more transformative side of it, as opposed to just sort of the enhancement side. It's okay, it's okay on the enhancement side, but like the transformative judge kind of like, it seems more important. Like the enhancement side is all right, but is the enhancement side, if all we were doing were substitution, clearly all the time investment and money investment in technology, in the infrastructure, in the devices, in the learning curve, in the professional development would not be worth it.
Right.
Would it be worth it with the augmentation just piece? I don't know, maybe. But like if you're in the transformative side, if you've got uses that are transformative, then it's easier to justify all of the investment in people's time, people's money, people's intellectual capital to actually use the stuff. And that's not to say if we've got all this already invested, if you want to use some enhancement stuff too, hey, fine. Who cares? It comes along. Like that's not costing any more, or it's costing a little bit more if it's software or something you need to buy. So that's kind of that's the idea with the SAMR model. And I like it because it's pretty simple. There are other models. There's one called TPAC that that just looking at it, like it's a good model, but like
it's complex.
It takes a while to figure it out. In this one, I especially like this pool version. You can just kind of look at it and understand, oh yeah, not like it's a huge big deal. Like, oh yeah, of course I want something that's, transforming to make a difference. But it just kind of reminds you that let me think about using this tech, not in a way that just like checks a box that I use tech, which we've had. When we went one-to-one, there was some pressure. I don't know that the pressure was intentionally a top-down pressure from administration, but teachers definitely, how it landed on them was there's a feeling of you need to use technology in your classroom because we just invested in this one-to-one program. And so as teachers sometimes were looking for a way to use tech to check a box that they use tech. And it wasn't really worth it for their time. And even the money, they didn't pay the money, but it wasn't worth it even just for their time to kind of figure it out.
Yeah. So, and I think in those segments or those elements, like then you definitely just see substitution. Then it becomes like a great example that you took up with the a blog instead of even blogging. It's like, okay, I have a Word document. All right, we'll write there instead of writing paper and pen. Yeah. Or
it's digitize versus digitalize.
Yeah.
Versus what we maybe do today.
Yeah. Yeah. And this it's great. I like the two different models that we're talking about here. So TPAC, of course, if you really love Venn diagrams, go for it. If you like, swimming pools, or what do you call it, staircases, you can think like SAMR
Right,
is
the
another.
ladder.
Yeah, yeah,
But
the
the first
ladder.
was a ladder. Yeah.
So I think that those both those models, and I mean I think you can I think you can talk about both those models almost in the same context, like in terms of like substitution. If you're going to transfer that over to TPAC, you're sort of like on the outskirts. You're in those on the outsides where nothing is overlapping in your Venn diagram at all. And then eventually you sort of move yourself towards the middle of that Venn diagram the more you approach the redefinition and modification elements of SAMR. So I think, like you said, Bill, you can use whatever model you kind of like have a good feel for. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's really interesting because I think also like a lot of schools probably don't even think about, or a lot of teachers don't even think about, like, am I actually doing this? But it's more of their like, gut instinct, or, well, I knew that was a good technology, I'm going to use it, or I thought creatively about how to implement this thing. And then all of a sudden you see that they've already gone through, like, okay, I see that I can substitute, I see that I can start to modify or adapt, and then eventually have my students redefine, and so it becomes this, like, I mean, it's I guess, I don't know, in some ways maybe part of their understanding, but it's fantastic that we can like lift that out and also say, hey, this is something that you can use if you haven't been thinking about it previously. You can apply this thing and start to vet things, based on that, or at least understand why you have the things that you have in your classroom, and also to think transformatively about how you're going to use technology. Because if you're not thinking transformatively, then you're more or less like a consumer of that technology, as opposed to a producer or a like an innovator, like you said, in that sense. Really cool. Oh, this is fun stuff. I'm again, maybe I should just go back. I'll go back to teaching. See you, Carl. That'll be our joke in every episode. I'm just gonna, like, I'll quit and then. I'm sorry, Bill.
It's okay.
It's
Glad
I'm off on one, of course, right now. I'm just having a good time. Um, maybe some things that I've been thinking about. Are there any like pitfalls that you see, like when you're working with and maybe this is coming back to where we were almost at the beginning of this episode, or this talk. Are there things that end up sort of backfiring? Have you experienced like those scenarios? Because I think that those are interesting as well to like learn from, in terms of implementing a technology or attempting to assist staff with how they're thinking about it. Are there things along the way that are sort of like, uh-oh, this didn't go the way I planned? I can definitely, if you want, I can tell you about all my all my pitfalls.
So I'll say one of the things that probably I constantly I don't know if beat myself up is too strong of a word about, but so I don't regularly. So one of the differences between when I teach a class with students and when I do any kind of professional development or training type things with faculty is, with students, there's a continuity. And, if you don't hit it great Monday, you see them again, maybe not Tuesday, depending on how often your class meets, but you're going to see them again
Yeah.
to clarify things, to take their reactions, and to do that sort of thing. So I don't regularly meet with faculty to provide professional development. Like, I may be asked to come in, like, in 2 weeks, I'm going to be one of 3 people who is doing who is leading or presenting, I guess, at a faculty meeting on AI, in education, some of the ways that we're using it, and we have a student there who's talking about their perspective, that sort of thing. So I will say that I think I've done professional development and training that it wasn't a disaster, because there was really no harm other than maybe somebody felt they wasted their time, which that's harm, but that's not like huge. In the long term scheme of things. So I think a lot of mine would be around, kind of around that.
Mhm.
Like, I wish, engaged better, or I presented better, and that sort of thing. With regards to introducing new tools or provisioning something new, because sort of the method that usually I take, which is it's more grassroots. I mean, the worst thing that happens is something ends up not getting used a lot, and then we get rid of it if it's something we have to pay for, that
Right.
sort of thing.
But that's like oh yeah, but I think that's like one of those. Well, you fail fast, and that allows you to be agile in like your decision making process. Like, okay, it didn't work. All right, let's go to the next thing and see where it is. And I'm just thinking like that's maybe in that sense like not so much a pitfall, but also like a way to be successful in innovating, in choosing the right technologies.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in an iterative process for things. I mean, that's something in classes that I've taught. It's kind of the engineering cycle, like in STEM education, that sort of thing. So luckily in the work that I do, I can get away with that to a certain extent. Some of my colleagues who have to do things like make sure wireless infrastructure works and device selection, what device we're going to pick to give to everybody next year, those sorts of things. It's a little bit harder to to be iterative on that. I mean, you can improve, but like if it's a disaster, and we did have an instance, I do remember quite a few years back, we did have an instance where, as I mentioned, with our high school students, they can choose to bring in their own computer, or they can buy one through the school. In middle school, iPads they buy through the school. We used to be the same devices 6 through 12. And we were using Windows tablet PCs back in that time. We were sort of early adopters of the tablet technology with a stylus. We've since moved for various reasons. But what model of tablet PC, for example, we're going to use. There's one year where we had a model, and we didn't spend I'm not going to lay this in any particular, like it's kind of a department thing or whatever. We've been doing it for quite a few years, so we didn't necessarily do the same due diligence we had in the past. Whereas in other years, as we chose a new model, some of us on the team, including myself, like I would take the device and use it as my work machine for like 4 months, sort of thing. We did have one that, for various reasons, we chose to go with, and we didn't go through that process. And it ended up in the hands of students and teachers, and it didn't work very well. And so so I guess that's to say that this idea of piloting and trying things out and living with something, like in like the real world, that I think is important. And there was an example of that. In the long term it was fine, but like in the short term it wasn't a great look, and wasn't a great experience for either of our customers, our students and our teachers, or for us as a department that had to support the problems that were happening. So it's that idea of trying things out and piloting things and seeing how people are going, I think is important. We'll see what happens in the next couple of years. One of the things I'm currently going to be working on, probably by May, is at least with our middle school and our upper school, is surveying faculty on sort of what learning management system they're using, because we have an official one, but also people use other tools for other things. So I want to get a feel for what people are using, because the experience that our students are having is starting to get a little bit fragmented with teachers choosing what works best for them. So students are having to possibly go into a bunch of different things that have overlapping functionality. And this is where I said like it's a double-edged sword a little bit, the not having you must do this and do everything in this. I don't know what the results are going to be from that, but if I do see at one division or the other that there is a majority use of something that's not what our current official thing is, then I might recommend that we actually make a change. And when you do that sort of thing, changing a learning management system, we'll see. That has the potential of causing some angst.
Yeah, but that also sounds like an exciting process in that sense. And I mean, I think what has been coming back, and I've been meaning to ask throughout this entire episode or this talk is, you've been talking actually a lot about systematic quality assurance along the way. Asking your staff, asking your students, reflecting on like what's working, what's not. And I think that's something that like when we took our break, I reflected a little bit about that, and it was like, yeah, that's a huge part in terms of being successful in the implementation process, in adoption process, in how to roll this out for students, or roll it out for a particular staff group or whatever. It's always like going back and looking at what was, and I think this ties again to what you talked about, Carl, like what's the impact here? And it maybe isn't like a direct impact, because that's like, okay, I don't know if the grades went up, but it's very complicated in that sense, but that there has to be some sort of like reflective process, and whether it's the students or whether it's the teachers. And I mean, is this am I off the mark, or I don't know, I'm just trying I'm trying to like think like if I heard things right, because at least that's what I'm noticing as like a pattern in what we've been talking about.
Yeah, no, I think that does seem true now that you say it. Maybe it's a little bit more aspirational than my words make it sound. I wouldn't necessarily say that I get all the feedback that maybe I should. I'm not like out there surveying everybody about everything. Some things are very anecdotal. As I mentioned, one of my challenges sometimes is accessing faculty to find out where they are and how they feel about things, just because they're busy and it's hard to get.
Yeah.
I just made a recent ask of all department chairs at the school to if they would include me on their sort of weekly emails they send that they're members of their department, just so I can get that piece more for the upper school teachers, like what's on their minds type,
Right.
like at least what's on the department's mind, like the official things. That's something I literally asked last week as we were going on break. I walked around and said, would you mind copying me on your communication, your department? They're like, well, 80% of it you're not going to care about. I'm like, that's fine. I can hit delete, like, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Because, I have that already at the grade levels for the middle school. So yeah, but I mean, I guess it is kind of a QA, process type of thing. I mean, to kind of make sure that, that what we're trying to do is, I don't know, that people are having good experiences and things are doing, what they're doing. The thing is, my job, like, what keeps me employed is helping, is there should be some positive impact on teaching and learning. And if people aren't using things, which is the worst that I guess can happen in most of these cases. Maybe we're paying a little bit of money, but I mean, that's significant, but like, in the long term, you eventually stop and whatever. But if people aren't using things and it turns out that if there's no use of digital tools, then clearly I'm not helping improve teaching and learning through technology. So I guess it's just kind of built into the way I work, and my job is part of my job is I need to make sure that people are having good experiences and that, that they can use stuff and, like they can learn how to use it and they have the resources they need to do that, because otherwise, clearly teaching and learning is it's a necessary condition for teaching and learning to be improved by technology. Again, we go back, there's a lot of necessary conditions. Trying to identify what are the sufficient conditions is a little bit trickier. But if you don't have the sort of baseline there, then it's not, it's not working. It's easier to know what's not working than to know what actually is working. What is working is tricky.
And I guess teachers would tell if something is not working.
Yes.
Either start testing new stuff or come to you if it's a centrally licensed setup, I guess.
And that's
and even sometimes, and if it's not working, so sometimes yes. Other times they'll just stop engaging with whatever that is.
Yeah.
And that's so I guess it gets to kind of what you said a little bit, John. Like that's kind of the quality assurance piece. If something is to a level where they're just going to assume it doesn't work and not use it anymore, I might not know that. I mean, I guess looking at analytics and usage statistics, that would be one way to to kind of get that.
Right.
An example of that is the copy machine. We're, by the way, we're kind of almost like a small college campus. We pretty much have mostly a block in Englewood, New Jersey, and we have like 10 different academic buildings, kind of divided by division, but not exactly. So not everybody's all together. My office is actually in a separate building where the library is. That's where my department is. Teachers aren't even normally in that building unless they come over there. So an example of that is like we have digital copiers, that you can send print jobs to all over the place. And we've addressed this a few years ago, but part of our accreditation self-study process, one of the things that came up was like this reliability piece of the machines people needed to print, and they couldn't half the time because they were just not working. Well, they didn't report that they were broken because the channels for reporting were unclear or whatever, or it wasn't easy to do to tell people. We would have fixed it if we knew it wasn't working. And if we had to keep fixing one, we would realize that it needs to be replaced and we need to have a new contractor, new vendor, or that sort of thing. But we never quite got to that. So there's also this point where if something gets to something where it just gets ignored and left, and people just say, oh, that's not worth anything. But you don't even, like me, I would be a teacher saying that, and I don't even know that that's the conclusion they've come to. So you have to do something in there to catch those things. And I guess that's that kind of QA piece a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's also like, I think in terms of coming into like educational or academic technologies, I mean, those are functions that probably need to be in place in the tool itself in order for it to be not just worthwhile for the educators in the classroom and for the students in the classroom, but also for those people that are going to administrate those tools, or like see over and make sure that everything is working as intended. So that's
So here's an example that to all the developers out there in any company who might hear this, whoever. One of the things that occurs to me that is useful is, like support that's built into a product, kind of a chat type thing, is useful, certainly. But I think one of the things that would be useful to me, maybe not everybody, but it's just the way I work. And I'm at a place that has a decent amount of resources, and somebody who's mostly full-time job is to do this kind of thing, whereas everybody doesn't have that. I would actually like to know what my faculty, the faculty who I'm supporting, what they're asking about when they use something. Because what that means is I need to provide better training or better resources that are available to them before they come up against that problem. So that's, kind of an example of that.
So
yeah, it's like I guess I want to see the support tickets, kind of.
Yeah.
But the other piece is some teachers will be reluctant to maybe open up a support ticket sometimes because the steps you have to go through are a little bit convoluted and complicated, or in some cases you can't even do it unless you're an administrator or something like that, which I get because there's a certain level 1 support that maybe they want to filter out. But if I don't know if faculty thought that or knew that that information is also going to somebody at the school type of thing, not that it's going to be an instant response. It's not tied into our help desk system. That's that would be great, I guess, but that would be a little complicated. At least it's like, oh, I'm kind of reporting, like I'm giving feedback on something that maybe can be changed, or at least if it can't be changed, more resources can be provided to deal with that.
Yeah. So what I'm taking away from this is that you want us, you would like for educational technology developers to build in some sort of redundancies where they basically don't need to support their product anymore because you'd be supporting the product. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, actually, when it comes to training, that is my job.
Yeah. But I mean,
yeah.
I think it's actually it's a fantastic idea in that sense, and I hope that developers out there are listening to this, because this is what this is what one is going to offload a lot of questions that come in, that first line. But then also I'm thinking it's going to offload a lot of questions that come to, directors of academic technologies, or, because they'll already have been answered. They'll already have come up with a guide or an easy way to solve that particular problem, or at least a training at some point. So I think that there's a lot of, it's almost like a win-win.
Maybe John, because you said you love statistics, so when you produce your like half-year report or your annual report, you can not only usage, not only that kind of information, but in the 10 most frequently asked support questions, or
and I mean you can do some fun breakdowns. I'm just thinking about like the support tools that that we use and that I've used in the past. It's there's always tagging systems, there's always analytics sitting on the back end, or behind the scenes, and you can always drill down, always. So this is not like, it's not rocket science. It's statistics. I love math.
Yeah, but I think it's an interesting perspective that you mentioned, but because of course also depending a little bit on how you have organized, like if you're a big school or organization, then maybe you have some internal first lines that would be the one talking to the vendor, to the support team. But most platforms, as you say, of course, they're open with the support chat button, which is on one perspective a big helper and a big support to have that, but also can create some gaps in terms of the internal communication. We could be asked a lot of questions that you necessarily, you're not aware. So, and I guess, and also like the tickets that we solve immediately. So how often would a teacher then come and say that, yeah, I've asked this question and yeah, they solved the problem and I got my response quickly. You wouldn't know. So
And then in some respects, that's a good thing. I mean, if
it's a
they
good
get
thing.
quick response enough to deal with it. And I have colleagues at other, other schools, public and private, that, may have less people to support the number of faculty and stuff they have. So honestly, they don't have the bandwidth even to know that, to necessarily do that. I mean, my primary job is not support. We actually have a help desk coordinator who that's his primary job. And I mean, tickets get assigned out to other people, including myself on occasion. But my job is sort of the professional development training piece. So there's that, balance of trying to get from, I guess you could get from a help that, kind of get from the help desk system, like what are the things you need to do a better job of sort of training. When you get into a particular product, from somebody from the outside, then yeah, that's the kind of thing I feel like could give that information. But something even like you said, like a top 10 list of frequently asked questions. I've tried to do that on our own help site, but I don't have a way to currently really automate it, because I think something like that, is useful. Because it's like if a bunch of people have the question, you probably have the question too. Yeah, I don't know.
Cool.
So I think, gentlemen, we've been it's almost 2 hours now.
Doesn't feel like 2 hours.
No,
I'm just like, oh man, I could do this all day.
Yeah, we could continue a little bit more, but I guess with the respect of Bill's time and I think it's time to maybe
we'll wrap up.
Is it anything that you would like to mention or pass on to the ones that's going to listen to this in terms of best practices, experiences, or have we covered most of the things?
I think we covered most of it. I mean, I will mention again, the relationship building is really important. And we talked about why. So I just think that's one of the, anybody who's been doing something like this, I think for a while knows that, but anybody who's new to doing kind of an instructional technology type role, that's important. And it takes time to do, fortunately or unfortunately. I mean, I like it. So for me, it's not an unfortunate thing, but some people might look at it as it's a lot of time to go to meetings and read notes and talk to people and do that sort of thing. And you're not problem solving at that point, which, I like problem solving too, but it's definitely an important piece that's necessary.
Great.
Neat. Yeah, this was fantastic. Thanks, Bill, so much for taking the time to talk with us. It's always a pleasure. Next time we'll talk about Ultimate Disk.
Sounds good.
For 2 hours.
Yeah, for 2 hours. Just
Chris Lehmann, who I quoted, by the way, he's also an ultimate frisbee coach. He's
perfect. The circle is complete. We've got it. Fantastic. But thanks so much for taking the time. This was it was a learning experience for me. I don't know, Carl, you probably you've been doing this.
No, but it's always a new experience, and since I don't have the background from education, it's I'm learning new stuff all the time.
Yeah. But
it was fun for me too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And and I totally forgot, for anyone that's out there listening right now, if you have questions about what we talked about today, in terms of academic technologies, strategies, whatever, you can always get in contact with us here at Digiexam. We'd love to talk about this stuff, clearly. And we can even maybe help you get in contact with Bill.
I'm
if he's willing to talk about this. Sorry, Bill, I'm just offering up your services now. I'm like, here,
it's gonna pop up the email.
No, if I'm happy to answer a question. You could always forward my email address on to people, or share my email address if you want as part of this.
Appreciate it.
But feel free to get in contact with us, and we'll see you next time.
And we see each other in New York.
Yeah, we'll see each other in New York. Oh, this is gonna be great. Yeah. Cool. Thanks so much, Bill. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.